No kings, no crowns. On October 18th, 2025, there was a day of defiance called No King's Day. Santa Cruz in California showed up. Follow California buried history if you're ready to question power and who really rules this land. The protest movement wasn't about monarchs and fairy tales. It was about corruption, about authority turned tyranny, about democracy under threat. Across California, dozens of cities, from LA to Sacramento, citizens marched, chanted, held banners. They weren't just protesting one leader, they were blocking a system. What the slogans don't say, the flag waving at the protest is the same flag that waves over land once stolen, treaties unhonored, people pushed aside. When you hear no kings, ask yourself, who built this state? Who claimed the land? Who got paid? And who got erased? So here's your deep question. If democracy lets a few hold all the keys to the doors, is it still democracy? Here's your discussion question. In your city, does your version of power answer to the people or to lines on a map and contracts you never signed? And simple one, did you ever hear about No King's Day before today? Yes or no? The crown may be invisible, but the rules, they're real. Comment what power you're questioning. Follow California buried history and share this before they make the throne invisible too. Santa Cruz, the Bay Area, and California sells sunshine, but it was founded on genocide. Follow California buried history if you're ready to hear the story the state still refuses to tell. The Golden State wasn't born from dreams, it was built from violence. This page isn't about nostalgia, it's about truth. Long before Hollywood or Silicon Valley, before the Spanish flags, before the American flag, there were hundreds of native nations: Ama Mutsun, Ohlone, Tongva, Chumash, Miwok, Kumeyaay, thriving, trading, building, existing. Then came the missions, the militias, the miners. And behind every progress story was a massacre no one put in your textbook. The state government itself paid bounties for native scalps, yes, with taxpayer money, while calling it civilization. California's first governor even wrote that a war of extermination will continue to be waged. That's the part your fourth grade mission project left out. So tell me, how do you celebrate a paradise built on state-sponsored killing? That's your deep question. Should every California student learn this before ever hearing the words, manifest destiny? That's your discussion question. And simple one. Did you ever hear the word genocide used to describe California history? Yes or no? The beaches sparkle, the vineyards sell luxury, the missions still ring their bells, but the ground remembers. Comment what truth hit hardest, follow California buried history, and share this before the myth of the Golden State buries it again. They call it a mission. But what if I told you Mission Santa Cruz was California's first experiment in forced assimilation? Follow California buried if you're ready for the history the church, Santa Cruz the state, and the tourists don't want you to know. In 1791, Franciscan priest Fermin Francisco de la Suen didn't found Santa Cruz, he claimed it. The Spanish crown ordered him to plant a mission where the Awaswas, Amamutsun, Ohlone people had lived for 13,000 years. They didn't need saving. They had their own language, government, and spiritual life. What they got instead was military occupation disguised as salvation. Under the shadow of the cross, native people were baptized by force, renamed, and confined. Their lands along the San Lorenzo River, once rich with salmon and redwoods, became mission property. Labor wasn't voluntary, it was forced. Laswin called it conversion. The Awaswas, Amamutsun called it survival. So ask yourself, when a place of worship is built on stolen ground, what's it really worshiping? That's your deep question. Should these missions stand as sacred spaces or sites of state violence? That's your discussion question. Simple one. Did your Santa Cruz, Californian education ever tell you this? Yes or no? The Holy Cross still stands, but so do the descendants of those it tried to erase. Comment what truth hit hardest. Follow California Buried, and share this before more history gets rewritten. This map proves your California hometown used to have a different name. Follow California Buried History if you're ready to find out what your city was called before California existed. Before highways and Starbucks and suburbs, this land was already mapped, not by Spain, not by Mexico, not by the US, but by hundreds of native nations who knew every mountain, river, and coast by their own names. Santa Cruz, Ama Mutsun, Los Angeles, it was Tongva territory called Tovaangar. San Francisco, Ramaytush Ohlone land. Sacramento, Nisenan land. And the Central Valley, the beaches, the deserts, every inch of it already had a story. When colonizers arrived, they didn't just steal the land, they renamed it. Because erasure starts with language. When you erase the name, you erase belonging. How would it feel to grow up knowing your hometown's real, original name? The one your ancestors actually spoke? That's your deep question. Should Santa Cruz and California schools teach indigenous place names alongside modern ones? That's your discussion question. And simple one. Have you ever seen your city on an indigenous land map? Yes or no? Every map in California tells a story of what was taken, but also what still survives. Comment your city below, and I'll tell you what it used to be called. Follow California Buried History before the next map gets buried again. California didn't just steal native land once, it did it twice. Follow California Buried History. If you're ready for the truth, the state still refuses to admit. When the US took California from Mexico in 1848, it promised to respect all land grants. That was the lie that built the Golden State. Within a decade, American lawyers, bankers, and politicians rewrote the rules, forcing Mexican landowners, many of them indigenous or mixed native, to prove ownership in English courts designed for them to lose. Overnight, families who'd lived here for centuries were branded squatters on their own soil. But that was just theft part one. While they stole from Mexico, the US government quietly signed 18 treaties with California tribes, and then hid every single one in Washington, unratified, sealed from public view for decades. That's right, they made fake peace, then erased it from history. How can a state celebrate freedom when it was built on fraud and land grabs? That's your deep question. Should California finally admit those stolen treaties were the foundation of its wealth? That's your discussion question. And simple one, did you ever learn that California's treaties were deliberately hidden? Yes or no? The state calls it annexation. History calls it betrayal. Comment what truth hit hardest. Follow California Buried History and share this before they bury it again. California didn't just steal native land once, it did it twice. Follow California Buried History. If you're ready for the truth, the state still refuses to admit. When the US took California from Mexico in 1848, it promised to respect all land grants. That was the lie that built the Golden State. Within a decade, American lawyers, bankers, and politicians rewrote the rules, forcing Mexican landowners, many of them indigenous or mixed native, to prove ownership in English courts designed for them to lose. Overnight, families who'd lived here for centuries were branded squatters on their own soil. But that was just theft part one. While they stole from Mexico, the US government quietly signed 18 treaties with California tribes, and then hid every single one in Washington, unratified, sealed from public view for decades. That's right, they made fake peace, then erased it from history. How can a state celebrate freedom when it was built on fraud and land grabs? That's your deep question. Should California finally admit those stolen treaties were the foundation of its wealth? That's your discussion question. And simple one, did you ever learn that California's treaties were deliberately hidden? Yes or no? The state calls it annexation. History calls it betrayal. Comment what truth hit hardest. Follow California Buried History and share this before they bury it again. When Mexico granted land in California, it promised justice. The U.S. tore that promise apart. Follow California Buried History if you're ready for the truth America wrote out of its own textbooks. After Mexico won independence from Spain, it ended the mission system and returned huge areas to Native and Californio families. Those grants were meant to repair centuries of abuse, a fragile kind of justice finally taking root. Then came 1848. The U.S. invaded, called it annexation, and signed the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, promising to respect every Mexican land title. That treaty lasted about 5 minutes. Within a decade, U.S. lawyers rewrote property rules, demanded proof in English courts, and charged fees worth more than the land itself. Families who had titles signed by Mexican governors lost everything. Ranchos became railroad property. Native lands became public domain. And the U.S. called it progress. How do you build a democracy by erasing the people who already owned the land? That's your deep question. Should the U.S. be forced to acknowledge that its California wealth was built on fraud? That's your discussion question. And simple one, did you ever hear about the treaty that California broke on purpose? Yes or no? California's dream started with a lie. The promise of justice turned into a blueprint for theft. Comment what truth hit you hardest. Follow California Buried History and share this before the myth rewrites it again. The gold rush made California rich, and it nearly wiped out its native people. Follow California Buried History if you're ready for the truth behind the American dream they still celebrate. In 1848, gold was discovered in the Sierra Nevada. Within months, hundreds of thousands flooded in, miners, speculators, militias, and killers. They called it opportunity. Native Californians called it apocalypse. While schools still teach this as a boomtown fairy tale, reality was a state-sponsored genocide. The new California government passed laws allowing settlers to enslave Native people, kidnap children, and murder with impunity, then paid bounties for scalps. Literally, you could walk into a government office, drop a bag of severed heads, and collect your reward. Governor Peter Burnett called it a war of extermination. Newspapers called it progress. The state paid millions to remove Native communities so settlers could mine freely. How do you celebrate gold when it was mined from the bones of the people who lived here 13,000 years? That's your deep question. Should California rewrite its textbooks to include the genocide it funded? That's your discussion question. Simple one. Did you ever hear this version of the gold rush in school? Yes or no? They call it the birth of California. The truth, it was a massacre paid for in gold. Comment what shocked you most. Follow California Buried History and share this before this history gets buried again. Manifest destiny wasn't destiny. It was organized destruction. Follow California Buried History if you're ready to hear how America's greatest myth became California's bloodiest reality. Textbooks call manifest destiny a belief, the idea that America was meant to expand west. But the truth, it was a justification, a political strategy to legalize theft, murder, and erasure. California wasn't discovered, it was invaded. Politicians called it divine. Newspapers called it progress. But what it really meant was this: indigenous land would be seized, native people would be enslaved or exterminated, and settlers would call it civilization. The so-called pioneers didn't just travel west. They followed a blueprint of conquest signed off by Congress and blessed by churches. And when the blood dried, they renamed everything: rivers, mountains, tribes, towns, until even memory was colonized. That's not destiny. That's design. How do you call it freedom when the system was built on extermination? That's your deep question. Should manifest destiny be taught as a moral crime instead of a national triumph? That's your discussion question. And simple one. Did you ever hear this version of westward expansion? Yes or no? California's conquest wasn't fate, it was federal policy. Comment what truth hit hardest, follow California Buried History, and share this before they rewrite destiny again.